welcome to both of you. It's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. I'm going to start with a question for Benoit. I mentioned in my introduction that construction generates 37% of global CO2 emissions. That's a lot, staggering in fact. And yet the built environment is of course essential to people's lives. So what does sustainable construction mean? Because we've also worked out during the talks that there was not necessarily a consensus globally over what sustainable construction actually means, and how can it enable companies and economies achieve their climate targets?
Well, as you said, it has, of course, first a big impact on the planet, the CO2 emissions, also the natural resources, because we, within the construction sector, we take 50% in volumes of the natural resources. We produce 40% of the solid waste. So that's for the planet without talking about water and what it means. Second, beyond the planet, it brings a lot to the people. So I think we have to be very much aware that everywhere around the world, there is a housing crisis, which does have a huge impact on the societies. And sustainable construction can bring a lot in terms of health, in terms of well-being, be it at home or education buildings, hospitals, etc. So a big benefit for the people. That's the second point. The third I would mention, which unfortunately is rising, is extreme weather. So resilience, sustainable construction with the right urban planning should bring more resilience and climate adaptation going forward. So that's extremely important. So those are the main benefits, I would say, for sustainable construction. Of course, it's not one size fits all. We don't build in Switzerland like in Brazil, like in Canada or in Vietnam. We don't have the same needs. We don't have the same climate. So we have to be local by nature. So I think it's very important for the policymakers, for private companies to be local, to act locally in terms of circular economy, in terms of materials, in terms of skills, in terms of education, in terms of advocacy. So be local. But that would be the touch points I would mention on sustainable construction.
Thank you very much. Anacláudia, most governments are submitting their NDCs now or very soon, will do anyway. So what are the most important ways in which governments can incorporate sustainable construction into climate action?
Yeah, excellent point, and very timely, because right now they have to submit their NDCs. And one thing that we observed is that most of the NDCs, they do include aspects of building and constructions. But what they don't include is the perspective of cities. Only 27% of the NDCs, they consider the aspects of cities. And only 20 NDCs really incorporates concrete roadmaps and investments around cities. And this is a contradiction because, cities are responsible for 70% of greenhouse emissions. We have more than half of the population today living in cities. In 2050, we're going to have 70% of the population living in cities. So, and right now, cities, we are growing more in territory than in population. So we have to fix something, right? One critical aspect for me is land. And how we plan with cities, how we think issues about densification, for example, how we diversify, and thinking about the housing crisis, right? And the huge housing needs that we have. Basically, one city of New York per month for the next 37 years. It's a lot. Talking about almost 3 billion people living in inadequate situation, 1 billion people living in slums, 300 million homelessness, 100 plus million affected by conflicts, wars, millions disasters. So we're going to have to reconstruct, we have to rebuild, and the needs are huge. So we need to diversify and we need to see how we can maximize the territory that we have, the built environment, and also consider land as a critical aspect of sustainability.
Thank you very much. I think we better understand what's at stake here, really, and the scope of the problem. But let's move forward, of course, and talk about what's coming up next. So as we start a new year, Benoit, I was wondering if you could maybe tell us what your outlook is for sustainable construction, and maybe ask you to share some of the most innovative sustainable practices, materials, or technologies now emerging in the construction sector, and maybe what the headwinds or tailwinds, the challenges for them to scale up could be in the near future.
Well, it's important to be optimistic at the start of the year, so that's my role as business leader to be optimistic. So indeed, I am positive because you have heard from the barometer, 95% of the people that we interview, they are convinced about the benefits of sustainable construction. So I think the benefits for the planet, the benefits for the people, having a good, decent home against heat wave, against flooding is obvious to some extent. That's, I would say that's one. The green value of sustainable construction is already obvious. If I take the statistics of conveyancers in France, there is a 40% gap between the worst energy performance and the best energy performance. So regardless of the public policy, regardless of subsidy, tax incentive, the green value is there. So that's a positive in order to get the right motivation. The second reason to be optimistic is that innovation exists within the private sector. We know how to decarbonize multiple materials. I see here the CEO of Heidelberg, how to decarbonize cement. We know how to provide materials. We know how to make low-carbon glass, low-carbon plasterboard. So there is a lot of innovation in low-carbon materials. There is a lot of innovation in circular economy on how to incorporate more recycled materials with local loops of logistics. So there is a lot of innovation within the private sector and therefore solutions. There are some negatives. And for me, the main one is the lack of stability, visibility, consistency in the overall framework, mostly the public framework, but not only. So we need in our sector, building a city is not for one day or 1 week. It takes 30 years. We give 10 years warranty as a contractor to a construction. So we need some visibility and stability. There is inertia in the sector, and therefore we cannot afford to have a yo-yo or zigzag in public policies within the different countries. If I take the example of France, we had 4 ministries of housing in just the last 3 years. We have changed 10 times any kind of support to energy efficiency renovation. So we need visibility, stability, so that all the stakeholders, from the insurance, the bankers, the architects, the building materials manufacturer, the contractors, can work towards this framework and optimize it. Because one thing that we need to kill is that sustainable construction is more expensive. It's not. But for that, you need to plan ahead, you need to work together, you need to use modeling, digital, and then you can make it affordable. So good reasons to be optimistic, but we need stability, visibility in this overall framework.
And okay, so we've got exciting emerging tech solutions. We need more visibility and more stability. But what we also need, of course, is more collaboration across sectors. So, Anacláudia, I've got this question for you now. How should the public and the private sectors work together to overcome construction's challenges and accelerate the shift towards sustainable construction? What more could be done?
Yeah, I think there's no way out of the challenges that we face if we don't collaborate, right? And it's the private sectors, the public sector, the social sector, the academia, the researchers. And then within government, you have the national government and you have the local governments. For me, we also have the challenge, you touched upon it, of combining, right? So we have social needs and challenges, we have environmental needs and challenges, but we also need to create business, right? Opportunities. And I believe there's a place where we can meet. But one big aspect that we need to tackle is in regulation, combining the financial and the urban regulatory frameworks. For example, building codes, zoning, make sure that the money or the investments that land in cities, that they land well, right? For example, putting conditions and requirements and banks making banks understand or incorporate or embed the perspective of urban sustainability, let's say so, or construction sustainability in the way they provide finance. And I'm talking about public banks, about international banks, and about private banks. So adjust the instruments that we have to the levels of affordabilities. We are experiencing now historic affordability gaps, according to the IMF, from 2008 until now. This is the biggest gap that we ever face. And how can we close this gap? We have to make sure that the credit lines, the subsidies, they are aligned. They get to the cities where we need the houses. And I'm focusing a lot about houses because you mentioned the housing crisis, and because this is a priority now for UN Habitat. In places that respect the natural environment, and all the building codes, all the regulations, they will align everything that you said, that we build with local materials, that we build with materials that are aligned with the needs of the environment. So for me, we still have a way to go in terms of combining these frameworks, understanding the diversity of our needs. But on a positive note, we have lots of examples. Me and Carlo, many years ago, we worked together on PPP arrangements in the city of São Paulo. I'm looking at you and I'm remembering that was one of the most amazing experiences that I had, where we had professionals from all sectors sitting together, and then NGOs, academia, research, thinking about, a big portion of the city could be revitalized. And I think we can do that in many cities of the world.
Thank you very much. A brilliant case study, of course, to discuss over dinner tonight. Well, many thanks to both of you. But before we wrap up this conversation, I had a last question for you, Benoit Bazin. What's your call to action to leaders from the sector and beyond tonight, and maybe to our audience?
Well, first, collaboration. And this is the reason why we are there together. As you said, we need collaboration across all stakeholders. We cannot do it alone. Second, I think leadership. And truly be convinced. I think we have seen many examples. I can, of course, mention the example of Saint-Gobain. If you lead on innovation, if you lead on sustainable construction, on circular economy, you will create a competitive edge. So leadership on sustainable construction is possible, is profitable in the right sense for the planet, for the people, and also for the corporation you can lead. And then be the ambassador of what needs to change, be the advocate, and we are there together to stay optimistic. So I'm truly optimistic, but clearly collaboration, leadership, innovation will change things for the better. So thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you.
Many thanks, Benoit Bazin and Anacláudia Rossbach. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.